This is Sean with Easy Street Billiards doing our weekly stream. I got Vic handling the comments.
Hello.
The dog is in the house, I guess.
No, he's outside.
Ooh, he'll probably bust in soon and you'll hear it. You're like, what are you guys doing? Anyways, today we're going to talk about, well, I'm going to talk about, but if you guys comment as well, we can discuss it. How do you translate what you're working on now into permanent change, and kind of like knowing that what you're doing is actually going to work and make you a better player, and all those kinds of things associated with it. I think I'll just begin with kind of my understanding of pool is that if we speak towards, just say, for instance, we're speaking about your Fargo rating, for instance. The way that I kind of analyze and simplify down how you develop your Fargo is it's a statistical representation of your past results, which is all wins and losses ultimately. And the statistics show that it doesn't matter what size table you're playing on. It doesn't matter so much the game as far as the games that are being rated. You're over time, everything evens out. So to me, that becomes questions like, okay, well, what goes into winning and losing, and that ultimately is a combination of aggression and assertiveness and ball pocketing, and also learning how to play different styles of safeties and different moving game type things and defense, and positioning yourself to a better chance to win. And I'd say that for most players that are trying to compete or be competitive and that want to be known as, better later than they are now, and to continue to improve, that's the incentive for them to work on their game. Now, I'm not going to speak towards trick shots and things like that, because that's its own fascinating art form that has its own, draw and allure to it. Also, some people are in it to be social, and some people are in it they like maybe they're a cue collector. They like to hit balls, but they like to enjoy the art of, excellent cue manufacturing and all that stuff. But we're speaking towards the skill of the game, that what goes into Fargo. So I would say that if you just look at each thing that you do, each option that you have, there's going to be a skill level associated with the shot that you've selected, and your ability to have a balanced game that doesn't have too many glaring holes in it for your opponents to exploit will then allow you to win more often and thus increase your Fargo. So I think that one of the tricky things is that you have to kind of like work on your offense, you got to work on your defense, you got to work on your banking, you got to work on your kicking, you got to work on your jumping, you got to work on your breaking, you got to work your cue ball control, you got all the different things. And what's going to be the thing that helps you get better faster is a difficult question to answer. It's more like, the way that I would say is that really what you want to be doing is working on more things at once that you think, and work towards more of a foundational solidity, and then that foundation is the things that you can rely on, and that over time you can take that foundation of skills and add to that by increasing the solidity, or maybe the solidity of the skill that you're associated with. Like, if you work on your break for a week and you get feel for it, and then you switch over, and then now you're going to work on your jumping, then now for a week, then now, and you don't work on your break for that, then obviously you got to know that your break is not going to advance. It's probably going to decline while you're working on your other skill set, and that's a known thing. So you got to stimulate the thing that you're working on enough to actually show permanent change. And a lot of that has to do with the way that I kind of think about it is that you develop a new skill, and then you want to go try it out, and then what will happen is that when you're competing, especially, is that when you're trying the new skill, a lot of times you'll forget how to do it, and you forget in the moment exactly how you were doing it before, because now your awareness is on all the things that have to do with competition and less so on that skill. And that competition is its own skill, and then learning how to use competition properly and to frame it properly allows you then to be like, okay, well, I know that when I'm working in practice on my shot making, that in order for it to show itself, I have to shoot more shots that are a little bit outside of what I would typically go for, and that in order to show that I've actually gotten better at it, I just have to keep doing it. And it's disheartening in a way, because if you forget, like maybe you had like a stroke that was really working, and then now you're like trying to be like, oh, what was I doing to make that happen? And you're in a competition, and now you start thinking, oh, well, everything is breaking down, and I don't really know how to get back to that spot, and I've forgotten, so to speak, everything. And I feel like I'm back to the drawing board, like it totally collapsed. Now I'm like, I don't even know what to do. And that's a lot of it is that will cause players to then just kind of give up on the thing and then move to the next thing, thinking that it didn't actually make me better. And that itself is the problem so much, where if you look at how you're failing and you don't see it as the avenue for growth, then you can't learn the lesson from the mistakes that you made. And then you also aren't looking at the things that you were doing well that probably could contribute ultimately to your growth and success. If you think about how you didn't win because you're working on your whatever skill it is, and you try to utilize it, and it fell apart on you. If you're focusing on the result of the match, for instance, more so than the process of learning how to do the thing, like I remembered part of what I wanted to do, not the full program that I'm trying to initiate, but I did remember the beginning. I remembered even that I was going to try to do that. That in itself is a success, and that leads you to obviously being more aware of what you're actually doing. If you're trying to be totally unconscious with your behaviors, nobody's trying to do that really, but if you are unconscious with your behaviors, then you won't even notice that you were trying to do this thing. And the first step towards growing is being aware of what you're actually trying to accomplish, what your goal is to do, and have a belief and understanding that if it worked from the beginning, then you would already known the skill. It's impossible to just pull it off the first time and then have that be permanent change in your life. It's all about getting back in there, taking the good from what you're doing and improving that, and thinking not so much about how I'm failing, but how I'm succeeding at this change. And part of that success is a little bit more ephemeral, so to speak. It's a little bit more like, behind the curtain. It's not the obvious thing that everyone necessarily is looking at. Is like, well, I want to get these results and I want them now. That's not how pool is. It's like, if you want to get better at pool, you have to put your energy towards it, and you have to know that there's a process of learning, and that you have to go through all those stages in order to acquire knowledge and then have permanent growth. If you dabble in different things, that's fine, but you have to realize that the dabbling has to be enough dabbling to be like, give you direction, so that then you'd be like, well, I went this way for a while, and then I realized that it just didn't seem like it was going to work long term. And that mindset is, well, it's like, why did you go for it in the first place? Did you Were you admiring, or were you just listening, admiring a player that's better than you, or a player that has a skill that you'd like to develop, and then you trying to do it the way they do it, and then you kind of figured that out, but then now it's breaking down in competition, and you're like, oh well, I don't know if it's even worth it, and all that. A lot of it just comes down to the mindset of knowing that that you either win or you learn. If you're fortunate, you can win and learn. Like, you can win while making mistakes and then learn from those mistakes, and that's how you win and learn. Otherwise, you just lose. And then now, if you're not learning from the losses and being like, what did I do that could actually help me get better, and what should I be doing? And I think a lot of it is just a mental exercise of realizing that if you feel like the reason why you're failing is because you can't execute your new strategy, that's totally natural, and that's just a part of growth, and that actually you're on the right path. If you're actually trying to implement a strategy that is new, that means you're conscious enough about your own growth to where you're trying to incorporate a new move. If you're an animal, you're not going to learn anything new about the things that you do. You're going to do it the same way. It worked before, it'll continue to work. I'm not going to advance my technique. I'm not going to work on myself. But we're human beings. We have the ability to be objective about our behaviors and decide we're going to make changes. But we know that we have habits, and we need to change our habits. And it takes, days, weeks, months for habits to change. And when you're speaking about competition, and this is kind of how it goes, is that if you're trying to win so much that's the most important thing, that's fine. I'll just say that in my opinion is that you will default to what you know, and you will not use things that you don't know, and that is why you won't grow, because you're only going to do the things you already know how to do. You're going to advance the things that you're already good at, but you can only do that to a certain level before now you're kind of maxed out, and now that you have an imbalance in your game, and in order to address the imbalance, you have to choose consciously to do something that you're not as good at, and that itself is one of the primary difficulties for people, is that when they compete, they forget that they're supposed to fail at the beginning when they try new things, and that's actually just what you're doing. And it's hard to see when you're at a level where you're not necessarily always successful, or not always successful, but pretty successful. Like, I'm blessed to be one of the better players in the area that I live at, so that when I go play a tournament, it's typical that there's only maybe 1-2 players that are like on paper better than I am, and I know that those players, based on the situation, they're not going to win every time. I'm going to be able to pull it off, and then there's going to be a group of players below them that I'm pretty much going to beat almost every time, and I have the luxury then of not having the necessity of playing my best game, and then I can incorporate new skills while I'm playing people, and I've become accustomed to that, and that's part of my ability to grow, is through the knowledge that I am not really trying in a sense to use my best abilities. I'm trying to develop new abilities, and I know that because of that I'm going to fail quite often. But that's the process that you need to go through. There's really no other way to do it. If you want to learn a new thing, you're going to start out being subpar at it. And then as you continue to develop it and utilize it and put it into practice and make it foundational, it takes time and effort and energy. And I don't think there's a single thing that you can work on in your game that won't help you get better. It's more about understanding that if we forget about the way the process of growth is, which is that there's going to be growing pains, there's going to be struggles, there's going to be discomfort, and it doesn't have to be max all of those things. You get to choose your level of how much you're willing to take based off your situation. It's not just like, I'm going to go in and just going to go head to head every time and just challenge myself to max and then explode and then just have to pick up the pieces every single time. You can't just be like, well, on this shot, I'm going to do it a little different. I'm going to try to do the thing that I've been working on instead of what I know I could do, because that's what we're here for, is to grow, not to win. Winning is a process where if you work your process and you execute on your game plan better than their opponent, then you'll win. It doesn't, and then but there's also luck factors, so many different things that go into winning that you don't really have control over. And if you focus too much on that, you won't be successful long term, because that's not how you get better. You have to incorporate new skills into your game, and that takes time. And a lot of it has to do with believing that what you're doing is going to help you so much that in itself is what makes the skill work better. Is that knowing, not just thinking or hoping, but knowing that if I continue to work on the thing that I'm working on now, eventually I'll have it mastered, at least to a relative mastery level, where you don't have to be like the best in the world at it. You need to achieve what's called relative mastery, which is that you can do it routinely, easily, with a high rate of success. You're not going to completely master it to the level where you do it every single time, unless you focus on that for a very long time and then come back to it as well. You have to let the skill be the skill, use it when necessary, and focus on other things. And then in order to know that you actually have it down, you got to use it again and focus on it and see how, if it's broke down, or see if it's devolved, or see that it's actually enhancing your game. And that's a process that takes time. And fortunately, this is one of those long run games where if you're a committed pool player, that you really don't have any limitations as far as that goes. It's like it takes as long as it takes. If you believe that you're a slow learner, it's going to take longer. It's more a fact of like, well, how quickly can I actually learn? And then you learn something. This would be a good thought experiment for y'all, is go and find a paragraph that you want to memorize and see how long it takes to memorize it and be able to reproduce it without making an error. And then understand that that's just memorizing 30 to 40 or 50 words and then regurgitating that on command. And then think about how that might take a week or 2 weeks to get it locked in. And then you think about like, well, I want to be able to bank this ball in against a high rated player on purpose when my banking is low percentage at this time. And then ask yourself, is it going to take 2 weeks to have a permanent change in my ability when it takes 2 weeks just to learn how to memorize 50 words? It's not like it happens in one day. I mean, that's the thing, is that you're going to have the aha moment, and then the skill is going to feel like, ooh, I got it locked in. That's how it works. The way the skill progression is that you're here, you're kind of like floating in a plateau, and then you'll have an aha moment, and then all of a sudden you'll feel like your skill is like way above where it was, and you're like, ooh, I've gotten better. And that's normal. You have that moment, and then you ride that as long as you can. That's what you're supposed to do. As soon as you start to have the aha moment, you try to memorize and feel and absorb as much of the new thing as you can to remember it, because tomorrow when you wake up, it'll be gone a little bit, and you'll start progressing down just a little bit, and then you'll go back to this plateau, and hopefully your next plateau is higher than the one that you were at before, and that means that you've grown and gotten better. And if you don't know that's how it works, there's plenty of resources that you can look at that explain exactly what I'm saying, which is that it's a process of accumulation, a process of getting relative mastery, and then from that place of relative mastery, you'll find a new thing that then elevates your game just a little bit. And you got to realize is that in pool, at the beginning, it's easy to get better at something because there's so many things that you're not good at, that if any one thing can help you. I think, at the beginning, it's difficult to just get down straight on the ball on the shot line and then hit the ball in the center of the cue ball. That's a difficult skill to master. That takes years for some people. If you don't work on it, it will take forever because it will never actually happen. You know, you have to focus on it and you have to spend time on it and you have to come back to it. And it's a process. And that I think that what then becomes more important is like looking at what things can I do that will help my whole game all the time. And that's when my focus for myself is just working on the process by which I get down and automating that so that then when I'm shooting a different shot, because it's all about like, it's a different shot, you know, maybe I'll work on my, you know, like my bridge or whatever, because I don't feel comfortable with the bridge, and then I'll work on that. But that's all, once you achieve relative mastery, that's not what's holding you back. What's holding you back is more like your belief that, you know, what you're doing is actually helping you get better, and that's what's in the way, is that you don't believe that what you're doing is going to help you because you haven't given it an opportunity. And not just that, but if you have a negative mindset about it where like, oh, it failed, now it's harder to learn because you're not enjoying yourself. So for me, what I try to help people understand is that long term, the important thing is if you want to learn and get better, you need to enjoy yourself, because learning is harder when you're not having fun. They say that it takes like 30 times more reps when you're not having fun than when you're having fun to learn the same skill. So if you think about, if you're grinding a drill and you hate it versus doing something that you're enjoying that is just challenging enough to be interesting and keep you in it, and you kind of like find the zone for a second, the second situation is far superior, and you should be always searching for those little things that you can do to make it interesting that you can see will actually end up helping your game. And they don't have to be, you know, monster drills or anything like that. It can be something simple. You know, if you want to work on your cue ball control, you know, do some easy drills, see how easy they are. Once they become pretty simple, then you just advance one level and then work on that and continue to do that, and then work on one level at a time, and you'll see that a slow progression, an incremental progression, is a guaranteed path to growth, because you're not over challenging yourself constantly and then having yourself just continue to break down. And the challenge is, a lot of it is just realizing that, like, if we break down mentally and emotionally, that's actually the skill that we need to develop the most, is the fortitude to keep showing up even though you're failing, because you know intellectually, and you have to know in your heart and in your spirit that that's actually what we came here for, is to break ourselves down. And that if we've done that, then we've actually succeeded, because that's actually the best stimulus for growth, is to break yourself down a little bit. It's like if you're going to exercise and you're going to get in shape, you're going to get sore. In order for your muscles to get stronger, you have to use them, and you have to put yourself in discomfort. You're not going to get stronger by just doing the same thing you've been doing every day. You have to challenge yourself, you know. But if you go out there and all of a sudden you decide that, you know, well, I can run 3 miles, so now I'm going to just sign up for a triathlon tomorrow, you're going to hurt yourself real bad. There's too much challenge. But if you decide, well, I'm going to add an extra mile onto my 3-mile run, you know, or I'm going to try to cut 5 seconds off my mile time over the next week, you can really make that change. Do we have a comment?
Yeah.
What do we got?
Mike McGee says, good morning. I have a question. When in the chair, what is the strategy? I know what should not be occupying my mind: score, win, lose, negativity. What do you do when between shots?
That's a great question. So the question is, when you're in the chair and it's not your turn, what do you do? And I don't necessarily think that it's that important exactly what you do. My belief is that what's more important is that you have a task that you've decided beforehand that you're going to work on, and that your goal is to be mindful enough to be able to work on that thing, and that it's not so much that you have a specific task or a specific skill that you want to learn, or that you want to like work on your breathing, for instance, or, you know, mental exercise. Maybe you visualize your opponent. You pretend that you're your opponent while they're running the balls, and you try to see yourself being successful in running those balls as a visualization exercise, or you're just, doing box breathing or whatever that is. I don't think that there's like a one solution thing. I think that really that underneath that particular thing is that you kind of want, what you're looking to do is develop the ability to have control of what you're focusing on all the time, and that you make decisions, clear decisions about what you're about, so that then when you're actually playing pool, you've habitualized making clear decisions. Because I feel like most people, where they fail is because they don't actually have the ability to focus long enough or make clear decisions that will actually help them. And then when they lose focus, or when they're not making clear decisions, that's when they fail, and then they feel like they're not good because they're failing, and they don't see that really the skill that you're trying to learn is not a particular skill. It's actually a focus exercise, that you need to learn how to focus longer. You need to be able to focus deeper. You need to be able to have more conscious awareness for longer periods of time, because that's the thing that keeps people from getting better, is that they can't focus for longer than 5 minutes. And that's the problem, is like, if you're trying to beat me at pool, and every time you miss your shot you check your Facebook, it's going to be difficult, because I'm not doing that. I'm focusing on what I'm doing. I'm focusing on my energy level. I'm focusing on all these things, and I practice developing more of that, because I know that that's the most important thing. The thing that costs you in matches is the lack of focus, the getting your eye off the ball, a lack of decision making where you second guess yourself. Those are the things that you need to develop. The skill itself is simple. If you could focus on it completely, it would be easy to learn it. The problem is that if you're not focusing on it completely, you're focused on it partially, but there's also something that you're focusing on instead of that thing, and you're also getting better at that. So if you're distracted, you need to learn how to focus. That's really one of the most important things, and that itself is the skill that makes people better, more so than having like particular ability at shot making or defensive play. This is the ability to make clear decisions and the ability to focus on what you're doing, so that you're there completely at doing the activity, not partly there, partly thinking about what's going to happen if I lose, what's going to happen if I win, what's going to happen if my hair gets messed up, whatever it is. Like, you got to be here in the moment. Like, what are we doing actually? And that is a really huge thing that long term will benefit you more than any particular skill that you have in pool. Once you realize that, well, the reason why I'm not able to accomplish the thing that I'm working on is not because I can't do it, it's because I forget how to focus on it, because I haven't been practicing focusing, and I've been working on having, I'm going to make a video pretty soon about different things that I think are like sub skills that are underneath the common, like, do this drill to get better at this, do that drill to get better at that. That stuff is very common. I think what people need is more about like, okay, what is missing from the world today? Well, a lot of it's like there's so many distractions. There's like very little ability for people to understand that they've lost focus. That's why they're having trouble, because so many other people are also not focusing, and it becomes normal. And then you wonder why there's people out there that are just killing it, doing everything they do, and it's just because they're focusing on what they're doing. It's not because they're great at anything. If you just pay attention to what you need to do, and you keep that in your mind, it's not difficult to realize that it's actually a simple thing. If you're trying to bank this 2-ball in, for instance, I don't know if you can see there's a spot on the table that you need to hit. If you can focus on what the cue ball needs to do to make the ball go to that spot and then go into the rail, and you can do that as deeply as I can, and be able to consistently hit, because you can focus on your body motion, the way that the pattern, the repetition of it, long enough to actually memorize it. It takes time. It's not just a feel thing. It's like, I know where my body is in space because I'm paying attention to it completely, and I'm not distracted by the things, if that makes sense. So I hope that helps address that thing. But I think that if you think more about like my ability to focus on specific things, and my ability to change my point of awareness consciously and decide, instead of focusing on a negative result, which I'm noticing, I'm focusing on, oh, okay, I noticed that I lost my focus and I started letting my mind wander, and it wandered over to this place that I'm not trying to be at. And now I need to learn how to refocus myself to the activity, because when you're fully immersed in what you're doing, it's a totally different thing. That's the zone, is that you are here. There's nothing pulling you from here because there's nowhere else to go. You are here. There's nothing else. Once you start losing focus, then you're like, you think about, oh, I'm a little bit hungry or whatever. What am I going to eat? Thirsty, all that. But if you're fully in the moment, that won't even be a thing that even comes into your mind. But that itself is a skill. How do I achieve the level of stillness in myself repeatedly, programmably, to where now it's not a skill, it's just how I am, it's who I am as I focus. I am a person that is focused and determined to do the thing, and it doesn't matter what the thing is sort of my point. It's like there's so many skills to learn. You'll work on all these different things, and through the process of that, hopefully you're developing focus, because that's the thing that you need when it comes down to the time that you want to do something. You need to be able to learn how to focus on it when there's pressure. However you've decided you define pressure. If you don't feel social anxiety when you're playing pool and there's 40 people watching, you don't feel pressure the way that other people do that do have that. And if you can learn how to focus more deeply and forget that there's people around because you're focusing on what you're doing, or you're incorporating the fact that you've spent time using your own awareness to visualize the scenario where you can be successful when there's thousands of people watching potentially, then you won't have that problem. And that comes down to focus and awareness and consciousness, where you're thinking about what you're doing all the time. It doesn't matter what you're doing so much, it matters that you're focusing on it, and that focus builds itself over your life, and that if you don't work to develop it, it won't get better. And that's why I'm going to try to achieve, look and do some research and find different activities that you can do to help yourself focus longer and more deeply, and then incorporate that into some material for these types of things. So just to kind of wrap up, I guess I don't really have much more to say, is that if you're working towards, improving a skill, you just got to keep at it. If you think that you're not going to get better at it because you failed the first time and that you're now giving up on it, and then you're going to something else, that itself is the thing that you need to address, is that habit of giving up before you've learned what it is. That will benefit you more than any skill that you can learn, because that itself is a skill. Everything that you do is a habit. It's all repeating cycles, and that once you're aware of the cycle that you're in, then you can change it. But that is, again, awareness, focus. If you lose focus, then you are in a cycle, because now you're in a habit. If you're focused completely, there's no habit. You're doing exactly what you choose to do consciously. It's not a habit. It's just something that you're doing. You're being focused, and thus any activity you do is easier because you're focusing on it, and that is the skill. It's not the skill or the activity that you're doing that's the skill. You're good at things because you can focus better. I think that everyone kind of realizes that if you're good at one thing, you can get good at everything, and that the reason why is because you have a certain level of focus, and the more focus you have, the better you can get at everything, because you see more about what's going on, because you can see deeper, because you can focus better, and then you can see into what you're doing more clearly than another person that is constantly distracted and has other things going on in their head. And that's not to say that it's a better life. It's just a different life. You get to choose what your life is going to be through what you do. And that if you're not aware of the fact that focus is pretty much the most important thing in pool, then I'm hoping that you get benefit from this, because it really is that if you it's like the dopamine from a successful action has to come from the game. Otherwise, you're going to be drawn away from it constantly. So if you choose to have a thing that's not results based allow you to then receive the dopamine, then it doesn't matter if you do the thing, but then through the process of continuation of the activity, you'll receive dopamine because you'll realize that it's not about the result of the action, but it's about the process of the way you go through it, through the awareness of what you're doing, and then you receive dopamine from the fact that you're accomplishing your goals, which is to be habitual about focusing, and that becomes its own reward mechanism. When you're so completely results based, you only get the dopamine when you do a thing and it comes out right, and that's what draws people away from pool, because it's hard to be results based and be successful in pool because there's always going to be somebody better than you. You're always going to get unlucky here and there. You're not always going to get things the way you want. You're not always going to have complete control of the scenario, and there's so many different things that are outside of your control that affect your results, and that by being results based completely or even partly, it's very difficult. It's more about learning that if I set my mind up a certain way, then it rewards the things that will then become the infrastructure for my success, and that building that infrastructure is the only thing you have to do. All the skills are easy to learn when you reward yourself by just working on them. You don't, it doesn't matter if you get pro level at any particular skill. It's more about being pro level with your mentality of like the fact that you could do anything and get better at it, and know that that's not going to help your game. But a lot of that has to do with the process and understanding the process that's going on constantly. And I think that that's a lot of what it comes down to, and by taking like, okay, what am I going to do right now that's going to help me? And then you realize it's like, okay, well, today I decided that I'm going to, work on finishing my stroke. And in order to do that, well, you have to decide what your stroke's going to look like, so then you got to be like, okay, well, what is my stroke going to look like? And that becomes this thing where now it's like shooting the shot is a secondary thing. Like, what's more important is that I get down and finish my stroke properly. Making the ball will happen as a result of me mastering finishing my stroke properly, and then just putting in enough reps to where it automates making the ball with this particular method of swinging my cue. And if you're focusing on honing the body, you'll see that through just the nature of the physics of what's going on is that you're applying energy into the table, and that it doesn't take that long when you know what kind of energy you're putting into the table to see the results of that and to make adjustments to make that all happen. The hard part is focusing on the energy you're putting into the table and mastering your ability to control the energy of the table in the way that you want to. The more you're able to control your body motions, the more you're able to control what's going on in your mind, the more able to control what's going to happen after you swing your cue. It's just an extension of your control of yourself extends into the game, and if you have less control of yourself, you have less control of the game. That should be pretty obvious, I think, is that if you can't swing your cue consistently, you can't hit the ball consistently, then you can't make the ball consistently, and you can't learn consistently because the results are inconsistent, and you're trying to be like, well, I overcut that ball, so now I got to aim fuller to hit it fuller to make the ball go in. But you don't realize is that on that shot, you put right English instead of left English, and it wasn't even that. It was the fact that you didn't hit the cue ball in the spot that you wanted to, and that itself it's the thing that so then it's back to the drawing board. You're getting bad information from yourself because you haven't learned how to control your motion enough to actually hit the ball where you want to and then see what actually is happening. And it takes a lifetime to master your motion, and over time you're going to develop different ways to create the motion, and eventually you'll find one that you can replicate, and that it's not so much that there's one that's proper. It's like you got to be adaptable enough to where it doesn't matter particularly, because when you're stretched out or you're, wherever, on the bridge, on the rail, all, over a ball, all that stuff changes what you can do, but the stroke and the power that you put into it is something that's consistent, and that learning that you can adapt to all these things over time. It's just about like, how do I want to have my motion be, and that becomes its own thing where you have to just focus on one thing at a time, and I think that for me, the thing that helps get people better faster than anything else is just focusing on alignment, centering, and decision making, and not worrying about the other stuff, because the other stuff flows from that foundational stuff. Like, your ability to focus is foundationally more important than any other skill that you can have, because if you can't focus, how are you going to achieve mastery of a skill when you're constantly being distracted, and then you come back to it, and then now you're like, well, how did I do what I was doing before when I was doing it so good? It was like, well, if you were focusing completely on it, you would know better. And that's just a focus thing where it's like, yeah, you can play great, but if you're out of focus when you're playing great and you don't see what you're doing, it's harder to replicate tomorrow, because you'll forget a little bit. Every day you wake up, and you've improved skills that you've worked on, but if you haven't worked on your focus, it won't get better. And part of like learning how to focus more is making it more interesting. But a lot of that's, then we can talk a whole thing about perspective, and that becomes its own. That's another habit, is if you're constantly thinking, this is not helping me and I don't know why I'm bothering and I keep failing, and I think about those things instead of being like, this is all part of the process of learning, this is good, this is growth, this is what it's supposed to be like, and now I can enjoy myself knowing that I'm constantly failing, but I'm failing up, I'm falling upwards because I get up every time, and now I move forward in my constant progression of plateauing, and then aha moments, and then in plateauing, and then going down to the accumulation, and then now you make another aha moment, and all I got to do is continue to grind through that whole process, and I'll have all these aha moments through my life. And that's literally what I play for, is to find these little kernels of fun and these little dopamine hits through the game that keep me interested and help me focus better, because I know that it's a reward mechanism that actually pays off in the long term. I'm helping myself through learning discipline and skills and focus, and that it translates to the rest of your life. And that's one of the great things about pool, is that it can help you, process your demons and all that stuff, and then work through that in an area, in a situation which isn't necessarily going to cause you, financial hardship. Like if you blow up at work and you lose your job, it's a bigger deal than if you blow up at the pool table and you end up out in two in a tournament, and then you go outside and you scream at the world or whatever. It's not as big of a deal, but that's a habit that you need to change. If you want to get better, if you get too emotional, in even good or bad, then you're tying your results to your emotional state, and your emotional state should be constant and tied more to the process by which you live your life. And the way that you play pool is the way you live your life in general. It's difficult to separate any activity from another activity, because your comfort of who you are, who your self-image is, doesn't change depending on where you're at. You're always feeling like you're the same person, whether or not you're playing pool or not. And if you have anxiety, or you feel anxiety, or there's energy, maybe you feel, in a situation where there's a lot of people around, you can feel their energy, and that affects your energy, and that itself is like an awareness thing, and then that needs to be addressed. Not everyone deals with the same problems. They don't have the same challenges. That's what makes everyone unique, and it's just about focusing. I think that there's nothing unique about learning how to focus better. I think that everyone can see that that's a primary skill that you need to have if you want to, like, long term be successful. If you're going to play a 2-day tournament and you lose focus for 2 matches, you're done. You need to have focus, and not just that, but if at the higher level you play, it's like if you lose focus for 1 or 2 shots, you're done. And if you could focus the whole time, it wouldn't necessarily mean that you need to be better. The shots aren't harder. They're actually easier when you focus better, because then you're more ready, and then it becomes a focus thing, And I guess we could just cycle through the same thing over and over again, but I really don't have much more to say. Do we have any more comments?
Mike just said that he's going to choose breathing to keep his heart rate as low as possible.
100%. Or you could even pretend, like speaking towards the choosing something to do in the chair, is that you could do an activity that you already are good at, that makes you calm, that you can do while you're in the chair. Um, if you have like a meditation or a contemplation or something like that you regularly do at home, and that causes you peace inside, then that can take you away from your awareness of an unusual scenario where you're a little bit uncomfortable, because what you're doing is you're drawing and accessing something that you are comfortable with. You have a state of mastery over certain activities that make you calm, and it's once you can take yourself from being in the chair in a competitive environment, and then you can be like, you know what, I'm going to pretend actually that I'm not even here. I'm going to pretend that I'm at home, having contemplation, or like memorize, like whatever it is. You can be like, if you're working on memorizing something, then you can just replay what you're memorizing in your mind, and then that is a focused exercise. You're focusing on what you're trying to do. And when you come to the pool table, now you're clear-headed, because you can just see with an open mind what's going on, because you weren't paying attention to all the negative consequences that might actually have happened, because you're focusing on getting better at another thing that doesn't seem like it helps necessarily, like directly, but if you can learn how to be comfortable in the chair, I don't see much more productive activity than just being ready to go when it's your turn. However you figure out how to do that is its own journey, so to speak. And that I think that you can draw from what you already know how to do that makes you calm, that doesn't make you move. Like I meditate quite often, and because of that, when I'm in the chair, I'm doing some sort of meditation type activity, contemplation activity, that doesn't have to necessarily relate to pool. A lot of it does, but a lot of the times I'm just being there as a witness to what's happening, and that's what my goal is, not to necessarily be involved in what's happening with my body, because my body doesn't need to do anything at that moment. So I'm letting my spirit go somewhere else and be in a place where it can be happy, and then when it's my turn, I can then just come back to the place and then do the thing that I know I'm going to do, because I'm focusing on what my next opportunity will be, and I'm okay with any of the negative like results that might occur, the mistakes that I might make. I know that through my habitual rerunning of the script is that I know that's how I got better, is by failing, working towards it, suffering a little bit, facing the discomfort, and just keep getting back out there, and then actually learning the thing that actually helps me progress beyond. And it's not like what that's going to be initially. It's all a very personal thing. But I'd say that there's a lot of analogies that people can take from other players, other people, that will help you. And as you develop as a person, the things that you work on will develop. That's the thing, is like you have more of a bag of tools to draw from over the course of your life if you continue to develop them. And that's really what makes people, like, what's a good player is a lot of times more comfortable, because they just like, well, any situation I get into, I'm going to have some sort of a shot. I'm going to have some sort of a plan. I'm going to be able to come up with some sort of thing. I'll have an idea of what to do, even if it's taking intentional fouls and tying balls at, which some people will never have even tried to do, hardly. They wouldn't even think of it in a pressure situation, because they're so afraid of what might happen if they let the other player have a shot. And it's like, well, you've already lost thousands of games in your life. What's one more? It doesn't matter. What matters is, am I doing my best on this shot? And then, but there's you don't know beforehand if this is going to work or not. That's not part of the game. You just do the thing, and then you get to see what happens. But part of it is that you have to trust that what you're doing is helping you, and that becomes its own skill, is trusting that there's nothing you can do that's wrong. The only wrong thing you can do is not paying attention, because then you don't see what you're really doing. You don't see what you could be doing differently. You can't make changes because you can't see what you're actually doing. You're not aware of it. And that comes back to the focus and awareness, and being able to be in the place where you're doing the thing. I think that's all I have to say for today. Appreciate everyone that made it this far. As always, like, subscribe if you want more of this content. If you want to be involved with our school.com group, it should be in the pinned comments. We're using that as the basis for the educational platform that we're developing for our pool hall that we're in process of doing all the things, and that all that information will then be, of course, given to you. But I want this to be a community driven project where my goal is to not necessarily talk about my own struggles, my own challenges, but I want to address what other people are working towards and help them move beyond the things that they're working on. So any comments that you put, if you go to the school group, make a comment there. This is what I'm working on. This is what I want to hear about. And I'm happy to talk about it. That's what I want to do. That's the purpose for this, is not just for my own gratification and hearing my own voice. It's because I want to communicate, my, hopefully what I would consider wisdom of my stuff, my experiences and how they've led me to accomplish what I've done. And my further progress is hinging upon helping other people, because that then solidifies my own understanding of what I'm talking about. I'm not just going to be out here, speaking about things that I'm not confident about. I will only give people my best information all the time. And if I don't have material to draw from, then it's a little bit more difficult to help people, because they're not allowing me to help them, because they're not telling me what their actual problems are. And I think that most of the problems that people deal with are kind of the same, and that it's just about like getting out there and being like, this is what I'm working on, this is what I want to hear about, because I'm struggling with these things and I'm happy to talk about it. And I think that if you get one or two little pieces of information that help you and benefit you, then that is all you're looking for one day. One day of pool, if you learn one little thing or get better at one little advancement over the course of a 10, 15, 20, 30 year career, depending on your age and your ability to continue to play, if you think about that, it's an easy way to see that you can get better if you just do baby steps and work on little things. And a lot of that has to do with focusing on what you're doing. The more you can focus, the more of those things will actually grab hold and stay with you and become a bigger, deeper, stronger foundation that then you can use that to work from, of your knowledge of the game, your ability to replicate, your processes in your mind, in your emotions, and in your body onto the table. And then that's how you get more successful. All right, thanks everybody. Hope you have a great one. We'll see you next time.